Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's productivity training brought to you by KETIV Technologies. My name is Brian Mokopunsuk, a customer success manager here at KETIV Technologies, wanting to ensure your success with the training and services and tools that we provide you guys. So today we'll be going over Vault data loading and best practices for doing it, how to do it, and our presenter, who I have with me today, is I was gonna say Vault, Jose Paredes Clara, who's our Vault specialist here at KETIV Technologies. How's it going, Jose?
Hey everyone. So yeah, like Brian mentioned, we're gonna go over some data loading, some best practices, the tools that are available to you guys to use, and hopefully getting you a better understanding of some of the errors that you might get, some of the common ones that come up. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Just to start off, again, my name is Jose Paredes Clara. I've been with KETIV for about 4 years. Just to go quickly over the agenda here, just going to go ahead and introduce myself. We're going to be talking today about data loading in general, and a couple of the tools that you can use for that are the Autoloader and the task scheduler. Now, for some of you that are familiar with servers and those kind of environments, I'm not talking about the Windows task scheduler. Inventor actually has its own task scheduler that gets installed whenever you have Inventor loaded onto a computer. So we'll go over more about what those entail and what environments you'd be doing this in. We'd be going over some of the best practices to go through as far as the data that you're going to be importing, as well as, depending on at what point in your Vault lifetime you're importing, which tool might work best. Once we go over that, we're going to go through a guided tour, basically use both of these tools to upload some information to a Vault. In my case, I do have an empty one that I'm going to start with, but we'll see how to use both methods to import it into Vault there. Other help resources, like we mentioned, Alan Gager will be jumping on to talk about the Solidworks add-in for Vault and how to data load through that. So he'll be doing part of that around an hour and a half or 2 hours in. He'll jump on and I'll introduce him, and he'll do his thing there. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session, anything specific to your environments, anything that you've run into, any errors that you have come up against that I don't present. We can go ahead and go over those. So moving on, that's me. I know you can't see me on the camera right now, but that's pretty much what I look like. I'm an application here at KETIV Technologies. I've been here for about 4 years, actually 4 years already. This month is I've been here for 4 years. Recently, I've been transitioning into a new role at KETIV, basically being the Vault Success Manager for our streamlined customers, making sure that not only their servers are healthy, but they're able to use the tool to its full potential. So if I've talked to some of you on the call recently, that's what I'm doing now. And if you want to take advantage of this resource, to take a look at the Vault tool, take a look at your workflow, please don't hesitate in reaching out. And again, I've been with KETIV for about 4 years. I did mention something earlier, KETIV Streamline. As far as our Streamline customers, this is a service that we provide for over a year with quarterly meetings with one of our customer success managers, which is Brian that introduced me earlier, as well as people like me trying to make sure that your workflows and your Vault are being utilized to its maximum potential there. This training today, the people that are attending today and the people that this will affect are typically, the designers, the drafters, or the engineers who are getting up and going with Vault. Vault is a system that is meant to control the versions and the revisions of your files, of your design data. So typically when you set it up, it will come empty. Basically, think of it as a safe. And when you buy a safe, unfortunately, it doesn't come with $1 million there that you can keep. But you can start putting in your own data, your own resources in there. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. Typically, the people that do this are the designers, are the engineers, drafters that are working in this environment. And again, the purpose today is to go ahead and introduce you guys to the workflows and the best practices of data loading here. So let's go ahead and get started here, introducing the tools. The first one we're going to go over here is called the Autodesk Vault Data Autoloader. You see that's the window that I have open up on my screen here. So this is actually installed with Vault Professional Client, or Vault Client in general. This is meant, again, to be a tool that helps you load your data in bulk into an empty vault. Something important to keep in mind here is the data that you're loading, you want to make sure that it is what we like to call clean data. Clean data means that whenever you open it up inside of Inventor, there are no broken links, there are no reference images that are missing, anything like that. Because as we'll see in a little bit here, there is actually a check that Vault Autoloader does to make sure that it is it's good to load, that there are no broken links, that it's able to open it up once it gets it uploaded into the vault. The other thing we like to talk about when talking about Autoloader, or even loading data into the vault in general, is drawing a line in the sand. Now, I know when we're talking about Vault and keeping your data safe, a lot of our customers think about loading pretty much everything that they have. And sometimes that might include archived projects or, some legacy data. What we like to recommend when we do some of these implementations, when we do some of these things here, is recommend that we draw a line in the sand, say, hey, these projects right here are the ones that we're working on currently, the ones that are being edited, that we're still changing. Let's draw that line here, and anything before those projects will be legacy data, archived. We won't need to keep them in the vault because they won't be changing. Yes, it's nice to keep them safe inside of the vault environment, but you won't need to be making edits to them. You won't be checking them in or out consistently there. So it's best to keep them out of the vault, keep the vault size down as long as possible before we start ballooning it with archive projects. The nice thing is, when you draw that line in the sand, if there is an archive project, typically what you can do is use either the autoloader or the task scheduler to load that into the vault when necessary. Let's say a customer requests it and you do need to make changes to it. You can just go ahead and load that into the vault without any issues. Just gonna go ahead and double check here the questions. So we have a question here saying, keeping legacy data out of the vault, does that produce two places to search for drawings? So that's a great question. If these drawings are constantly being searched or used in production or in to build things, then it might make sense at that point to include those projects into the vault loading process. When I'm talking about archived or legacy data, they're no longer being built. Maybe they were sold at some point or designed earlier in its lifetime, but it's no longer being offered. Maybe they do come up sometimes for maintenance. Let's say a customer bought it 15 years ago. They come back to you and they're like, hey, this actually broke. Can you help me fix it? Are there parts I can order? Well, if it's not in the vault at that point, or there are changes that need to happen to that design, at that point we can bring them in. But if it's drawings that are you constantly being search, definitely would suggest bringing those in. And then we have another question here. What type of files or formats are allowed to upload into Vault? So as far as managing inside of Vault, I mentioned earlier that there is a Solidworks add-in, so you can definitely upload those into Vault as well. But pretty much any Autodesk file type can be uploaded. Primarily today, we'll be working with inventor files, so IPTs, assemblies, anything along those lines. But you can also add Word documents, PowerPoint, any Office documents to the Vault this way. We'll see in a bit what ends up happening is we are actually choosing a folder in our local computer or our network drive to upload. What Autoloader ends up doing is it scans through it, finds all the files that are in there, and then does a check to make sure that they're healthy. Clarification on that, does that include PDFs? That does include PDFs. You will be able to manage and upload your PDFs in there. For those of you that have Vault Professional, sometimes there, or Vault Professional or Workgroup, there are what are called life cycles inside of Vault. And pretty much this helps you manage different types of files and lock them at certain points in their life cycle states. Typically, some of our customers have categories and lifecycle definitions for PDFs specifically. If that's, and I think on our list that there might be some lifecycle productivity training coming up in the next couple quarters. Not entirely sure, but if that's something that you guys are interested, I know I've done an AVA on it, on some life cycles there, as well as one of my colleagues, Eric Paul, did an AVA on it. So there are resources out there, but if it's something that you guys are interested in seeing through productivity training, just go ahead and reach out to us. Let us know, hey, I'd be very interested in the life cycles productivity training. And again, these are tailored to you guys as our Streamline customers. So let us know.
Hey, Jose, can you hear me? This is Brian speaking.
All right, so moving on here. We're gonna, again, take a look at Autoloader here. So again, typically we're gonna have a vault that is empty. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what my vault is looking like right here. And I'm doing this on Vault Professional 2020, but the interface for the Autoloader will be the same in Vault Basic or Vault Workgroup. All right, Jim, I'll go ahead and make a note of that. So lifecycle productivity training, we'll go ahead and take a look. I know having some meetings with Brian here to discuss the topics that we'll be doing. We like to do a Vault topic every quarter at least. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that there. All right. So if we're looking at my vault here, you'll see that it is pretty much empty here. For those of you familiar with Vault Professional or Vault in general, you'll know that you'll have a Project Explorer area. This is where your files are stored inside a Vault. But if I look inside of Designs, there are no files in here. The files that you are seeing here are this AVA project that I'll be using later on to upload something through Task Scheduler. Again, this is important because of the different times that you can use each tool to upload. And then I have this Designs IPJ that is actually created by the Autoloader automatically. So that's something nice there. A lot of our customers run into issues when creating a Vault Inventor project out of the bat or from scratch. What's really nice is if you're using Autoloader to add data to your Vault, it'll automatically create a Designs IPJ for you. And this is a vaulted Inventor project that you can use to work with Inventor and Vault. But coming back to Autoloader here, the thing that we're going to do next here is just click through. It gives you a summary of what the Autoloader is. And then what we're going to do is actually pick a folder that we want to upload into Vault. So what I'm going to do here is I actually have a data set directly from Autodesk that I downloaded. I extracted it, and I have one specifically that I'm using for productivity training right here. You'll see the _PT. The reason I'm doing that is there's actually a broken link in there with one of the side assemblies or sub-assemblies that come with it. It's not part of the main assembly we'll be uploading, but it's still included in the folder, and we'll take a look at that right now. So again, because I extracted it, it has a double, basically an extra layer or an extra folder in there when I extracted it. So I'm going to go down one level here to the jet engine model folder. And that's the folder I'm going to tell it I want to upload. So once I hit OK here, you'll see that it's going to tell me or ask me to pick a project that I want to open or scan this folder with. Now this part is important because if you pick a project that isn't mapped properly or doesn't know where to look for files of the assembly, you'll get a bunch of resolution errors. So think of a lot of our customers work with multiple IPJs in Inventor depending on the project that they're working on. So they'll have one project file for each project that they're working on. Let's pretend you're working on a KETIV project with us, and then you try to open up somebody else's assembly in our KETIV project. If you worked with Inventor, you'll know that you'll start getting a bunch of resolution errors if you try to open up one of those assemblies. So the same thing applies here. You want to make sure that you're choosing the appropriate IPJ to open up those files that you're looking at. In this case, this is that jet engine model IPJ that's in there. You'll notice that it automatically recognizes that that IPJ is in that folder with the assembly. So it tells you right here that it's located in there, and it automatically selects it. So that's the one that we're going to use. I'm going to hit OK. It gives you a list of the folders that you have in here. So you have, the library, so the content center files. These can be uploaded as well, and it'll recognize it, which is really nice. And then you have your actual workspace with IPTs and assemblies. In this case, like it was mentioned earlier, if you do have PDFs, if you do have Word documents, they will show up as well, and you'll be able to upload them. So clicking next here, now that we confirmed that those are the folders that we want to upload, you'll see that it actually puts it out into a flat list, and it wants us to do what is called a data scan and a report here. Again, this is the part of the Autoloader process that it goes through and make sure that none of it is broken. So what it's going to do is going to scan each part individually, make sure that A, it exists in the environment, and B, it's able to open it up. So the first thing, it automatically has everything selected. If it opens up fine, it'll deselect it in the list because it no longer needs to scan it. So what you do is once it gets to this window, you'll go ahead and just hit scan, and you'll see a status of it. What you want to see is successfully opened as you go. And then once it finishes the scan, you'll actually get a list of errors that you run into. In this case, it's only two. One of them is in the assembly here, this blade assembly. And then the second one's actually in the child of the blade assembly. So you'll see here that the two errors that we get are issues in children for the assembly, and then it can't find this one file inside of our folders. So it's a Rivet, so it's a content center file. But what you'll notice is for some reason, when this file was, this assembly was saved, it was looking in a different user location than originally intended. So this is, again, this comes back to what is clean data. Like, how do we work with our assemblies to make sure that it works? You want to go ahead and avoid these errors here. Again, the easiest way to fix this error here is actually going to cause us to close out of here and reinitiate the scan after we fix this error. Or if this blade assembly, which I mentioned earlier, isn't part of the large assembly or the main assembly, if that blade.iam is not really necessary, we can go ahead and actually remove it. So we can say, hey, we don't want to go ahead and add this. So what that does is it actually removes the top level assembly of that blade as well as any parts that are associated to it. Because we did that, you'll see that our total file count actually goes down to 95. And then the errors that we are getting are now down to 0. Because again, the problem assembly is gone. We don't need to worry about that anymore. So it's down to 0. But again, you don't want to go ahead and just start removing sub-assemblies or assemblies. In this case, it worked out really nice because it wasn't related to the top level assembly. So it wasn't going to cause any issues. But in most cases, if it is a sub-assembly, it'll affect an assembly above it. And that might be a sub-assembly as well. So it'll start this chain of, this chain of assemblies being affected, and you might end up removing more than you intended. So for that reason, what we recommend is actually fixing these problems. So I'm going to come in here into Inventor. I'm going to go ahead and open up a project. In this case, we're going to go ahead and open up the jet engine model that we were just working on. And then what we're going to do is open up that blade assembly that we saw was the issue. So if we open this up, you'll see that it runs into issues right away. It's like, hey, I can't find this rivet. Well, we know that the rivet should exist in our Content Center file. So all we have to do is go ahead and find it. And then again, it's named exactly the same. So once we resolve this link, we should be good to data load in here. Again, the easiest way to, before doing that scan, the easiest way to know whether or not you have some clean data here, open up the assemblies you're trying to load. If you run into errors like that one where, hey, I'm missing files, you'll know you're going to run into those errors during the scan as well. So now that we have this resolved, we're going to go ahead and save it and close out of it. So again, this was a pretty straightforward fix. It was missing that link, or that link was broken. We just needed to fix it, make sure that it found that rivet. So now if we run our Autoloader again, so we're going to go ahead and run it again. We're going to choose the exact same folder. So we're going to go to my downloads, and then Jet Engine PT, and then that Jet Engine model. Again, it's going to find the IPJ that we were working with to make sure that it can resolve those links. Same folders. And then we're going to run our scan again. And this time we're hoping for 0 errors. And as you can see, because we resolved the rivet link, we're actually good to go. No errors. So you'll see that it deselected all of them. It says I can open them. I can resolve all the links. We are good to go. So once that's done, just go ahead and hit next. And in this next part, you will need an administrator account to do this data loading. So it doesn't have to be specifically the administrator username, but if you're importing into the vault, you'll want to have the administrator role assigned to you. In this case, I will be using the administrator account, but for anyone on the call or in the meeting here, just make sure that you do have the administrator role assigned to you when you're doing data loading. So basically, you'll go through the same process that you would logging into your vault locally or your vault. You'll use your username, password, the server name. In this case, it's local to my computer, so I can use localhost, and then the name of the vault that you want to upload into. In this case, you can have multiple vaults available to you, but the one that we want to use in this case is our productivity training, which is the one that I showed you earlier. So if I hit OK, it'll log me in. If you try to log in without a administrator account, it'll actually go ahead and let you know. So I have a couple questions here. Where do you store the company standard IPJ? Is it in that vault location? So yes, if you're gonna have it is recommended that you have a company standard IPJ, one that is used by everyone at the company for that one vault connection. You will store it in this Project Explorer location. Again, if you don't have one and you're just starting out, you can use this designs.ipj file to get started. It'll make sure that everything is linked the way that you need it to right off the bat. And then go ahead and customize it to fit your environment. But yes, it is recommended keeping it inside of Vault, typically in this Project Explorer location. That way, whenever it is modified, the users will be able to grab a new copy of it pretty easily to update the one that they have on their local computer. So we have another question here. Does it have to be an administrator role, or is there a permission that can be given to a specific role to allow autoloading? So it depends on the year that you're working on. The reason that this question is actually a pretty good, thank you for bringing this up, is in more recent Vault versions, you have the ability to create your own roles. So if we go to our global settings, just a quick tangent here, you can create your own roles in here. So pretty much the administrator one will have certain permissions associated to it. One of them, I believe, is loading data. So off the top of as you can see, as an administrator, you're pretty much getting every role or every permission in the book here. If you are creating custom roles, you will be able to create one with a permission to go ahead and load data. So yeah, you should be able to create your own role there. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant there, but typically what we've done is just use an administrator role. If it's if it's initial loading, or you're worried about someone having way too much power after auto loading, maybe forgetting to remove that administrator permission. What we've also seen in the past is creating a role or a user with the administrator role that can then be disabled afterwards. All right. So going back to the autoloader, you'll see that it automatically saw that there were content center files in there, and it went ahead and just automatically mapped that. It's like, hey, this is where they belong, so we'll do that. As for the jet engine model, it gives you the option of what you want to do. So in this case, we have the folder that we selected, and it asks us where in the vault we want to place it. So let's go ahead and select the place. If we select designs and just hit OK, what it ends up doing is it'll create the jet engine model directly below it. So if I hit OK, you'll see that it automatically creates that jet engine model folder. Right below it, well, let's say that you have loaded data into a folder like this before. So let's say this jet engine model exists already, this folder, and then you're trying to add whatever new data is in that folder to here. What you can end up doing is using this direct mapping button here, and you'll see that if I hit direct mapping, it matches the folder that I have regardless of the name. So it doesn't have to be called jet engine model in order to be directly mapped. What that does is it just matches this level of the folder to the level that you selected. Another way to see this is if we select designs again and then say direct mapping, if I hit OK, it won't create this jet engine model, but it'll keep the same structure of those files. So anything directly underneath jet engine model will show up directly underneath designs now. So it's just one of those options that you can see. But in this case, we don't want it to directly map to designs. We want it to create that folder. We want to see that structure underneath. Again, if you're loading project by project, it's an easy way to separate each one of your projects by folder inside of Vault. So we're going to hit OK. You'll see that it created the jet engine model folder automatically here. And now that we're happy with where these files are going to go, we can go ahead and hit next. It does a final scan there with the files, tells you that it's validating them. And again, these are sample assemblies that I got from Autodesk. So they're pretty small. Your assemblies might be a little larger than that, somewhere in the thousands probably. We've seen some of our customers have assemblies that large, which will be fine to upload into Inventor. Once we get into the 10,000s or anything higher than that, that's when we would maybe think about breaking it down and doing smaller batches, or even using a different method. Once it's that large, if we want to break it up into chunks, we might end up using the task scheduler, which we'll look at in a little bit. But it scanned successfully. Typically, we don't see any issues here. Once it goes through its initial scan, make sure and it ensures that that it can open it, you typically won't run into an issue here. I have a question here. How do you use the direct mapping button? Is it only after the original files were uploaded? The direct mapping button, let's say right now the vault that I was working in is pretty much empty. So that jet engine folder didn't exist. But in some cases, we've had our customers create that folder structure already, just for any new files that are creating. They come out of the gate running and need to start working. Well, if you're still trying to load files into a folder that already exists, that's where you would use the direct mapping and upload the files through Autoloader. So if that folder already exists, you can go ahead and use the direct mapping to match the levels there. Otherwise, and we can go back here. Otherwise, so if this folder already existed and I end up doing, okay, I want the jet engine model to match up with the jet engine model. So I would typically use a direct mapping approach here. But if I don't, you'll see that it creates another folder underneath. That's something that we wanted to avoid earlier. So that's pretty much what you want to use the direct mapping button for. So in here, I'm going to go to direct mapping, and you'll see that it matches up the check mark to the folder and level that we want. Go ahead and delete this folder here because we don't need it. But yeah, so if the folder already exists, you can do a direct mapping to it. But if it doesn't, like it did with designs, we can go ahead and not directly map it, and it'll automatically create it for us. Hopefully that answers the question. Gonna go through next here. Again, it's gonna do its scans, make sure that everything still works. And again, if it goes through its initial scan, without any issues, or after you've resolved all the issues that it ran into. Typically, you won't run into any issues here. We did run into something with one of my colleagues trying to use this tool not too long ago. I think it was last week. And I ended up having to do with the amount of space he had available on his computer. What this does is it creates a copy of these files in a temp folder, which it then uses to upload into Vault. So if you are low on space on the workstation that you're using, you might run into an error there saying that it can't copy it to a temp folder. Just go ahead and keep that in mind. But typically it'll complete successfully, which means you can go through. And then it gives you a list of the files that you're uploading. You can go ahead and filter in here depending on how you want to upload. If it's huge files, you can break it down into IPTs first. You can break it down into assemblies afterwards, and then IDWs to make sure that everything's good to go in there. But in this case, it's a pretty small assembly that we're working with. We can go ahead and upload all of it at the same time. The next thing we want to do here is we want to go ahead and decide whether or not we want to use visualization files or create visualization files immediately for all of our files. For those of you that are not as familiar with Vault, visualization files are used in previewing the files. So in Vault, you'll have this preview tab for pretty much any Autodesk file or even any Office file. You will be able to see PowerPoints. You'll be able to preview them inside of Vault. So the question here is, hey, you're going to add these files to the Vault. Do you want to go ahead and create the preview files? So if you hit the check mark, you're saying yes, and then it's giving you a warning here, which is what I was going to touch on next. If you generate them immediately, it's going to go ahead and slow down the upload into Vault. So it's recommending what's called the job server or job processor. Some of you may have this already, but what that is it's a dedicated client computer that is in charge of processing these different odd jobs that Vault has. One of them is generating preview files on check-in. So that's what this is recommending. I actually have one installed on my computer. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use that. And you'll see here, I have the job processor set up. So, sorry about that. Just going through the questions, making sure that everything's good. So I'm going to go ahead and use the job server. One thing to keep in mind here is if we are looking at Vault, and if you're setting up your Vault for the first time or you haven't used it in a while, the job processor, in order for it to work properly, it needs what's called a default IPJ setup. So inside of administration, there's an option here to define your default inventor project. If this isn't defined and you try to use the job processor, it'll actually fail out. So my recommendation here is, if you're going to have a job server do it, and you don't have a default project file set up, just don't open up the job processor yet. Go ahead and upload these files. They'll upload fine. And then the jobs, and we'll see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually exit out of my job processor. So that's no longer running. So it won't process any of these jobs I'm about to send it. So again, we selected to create the visualization files. We selected to use a job server. And then again, this is giving you one last chance to tell you, hey, this is the structure that we're going to use to upload the files. Once you're happy with it, just go ahead and hit upload, and then it'll start going through its thing. It goes through the list, and then you'll get, again, another log file saying whether or not it uploaded successfully. All right, so everything worked great. Everything uploaded fine. And then there is a report here if we do need it. But we're gonna go ahead and hit done. And since we're already in Vault, we should be able to refresh our Vault here, go into designs, and you'll see this jet engine model, you'll see the workspace, and you'll see all the files that we just uploaded in the format that we needed them. So you'll see that everything in here is uploaded. If we go to the preview tab for one of our assemblies, you'll see that it's not generated yet. The way that we can check this is under tools, you'll have this job queue that you can check on. And then these are from yesterday. These errored out ones are from yesterday. And again, I ran into that issue yesterday where I didn't have a default inventor project set. So it errored out when I tried to process them the first time. So I'm gonna remove these from here. And then the other ones that we just sent today from 219, you'll see that they're all pending. Again, that's because my job processor isn't running yet. So if you don't have, if you're banking on the Autoloader creating this designs folder or this designs IPJ for you to use, then you won't have it set up as your default IPJ yet when it sends the jobs. So recommendation is to keep the job server turned off for now, process the Autoloader job, come in here and then set your default project. So once you set your default project to that designs IPJ, then go ahead and turn on your job processor. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my job processor now. It opens up, and now that it has an IPJ file, it won't fail trying to create these. So now it's gonna go through its job and create a preview file for each and every one of these. So you'll see the first one that it did was this rivet. Once it's done with this rivet, I can actually go to my Content Center files and preview that rivet. And again, what's really nice about these previews is, you know, that they are 3D, so you can rotate them out of there. But if you are working on a drawing or something and you need to take a quick measurement, you can go ahead and do that through the preview as well. Now these measurements don't stay there forever. So if I actually like click out of here, it's a little grumpy here, but if I click back and then try to take a look at the preview, that measurement that I took, it's no longer there. So again, pretty useful. And again, if you are using a job processor, this would typically be on a separate machine, so it won't use your resources, so you'll be able to keep designing and making changes in Inventor to other files. So that's what's really nice. The one caveat there is it does require an additional license of Vault Workgroup or Professional. So because it will be kept on a separate machine, whose dedicated job is to pretty much do this all day and every day. So that's Autoloader. Again, we got our files in there. We got them in the format that we need them to, and structure that we needed it to. We did run into an issue there with a missing or broken link that we were able to resolve and get that going. But overall, it went pretty smoothly. Are there any questions on that process, job process, or anything that we've talked about so far? Okay. So, I mean, if they're not coming up right now, then again, we still have some time here. So there's a question that came through while we were on break here, requesting some clarification on a job processor versus the server. I guess, so I'm assuming, I'm gonna go ahead and assume the clarification is between job processor and job server. There are two names for the same thing. Both, it's basically the same application there through the Vault client. and it goes ahead and it processes these jobs, basically these tasks that are generated by your users pretty much when they do certain functions inside of Vault or Inventor. Excuse me. Typically those tasks that are generated are the pre-file that I just saw on my end. Whenever a file is checked in, there's an option to have it generated by the job processor. So it'll send a job out there, and it creates that preview file for you whenever you check in a file. When you get into life cycles and things like that, there are options to automatically generate PDFs from drawings. These are tasks that can also be sent to the job processor to work through there. And then some of you might have experience with this as well, but there is Cool Orange, which is a company that has worked with Autodesk as far as Vault to gain additional functionality in there. One of the projects that we recently worked on that used Cool Orange and in turn used the job processor is creating DXF files to put inside of a watch folder for a nesting program to pick up. So you can use Cool Orange to gain that functionality through life cycles whenever something is released or whenever something is sent to a certain stage of their life cycle. It can go ahead and generate these files or place them in the location that you need. So again, that's some Cool Orange functionality with the job processor, but they work hand in hand, and it's customization that we've done for some of our customers to get them going there. So I hope that clears up your question there about job processor versus the server. If it didn't, let me know, and we can go ahead and take another stab at it there. But moving on, we just went over the Autoloader functionality inside of Vault. The other thing that we have here is actually, I think I closed it out of here, it's what's called the task scheduler through Inventor. So in here, each Inventor version that you work with will install its own task scheduler. So I actually have like 2018, 2019, and 2020 installed on my computer. Again, we're going to be working with Task Scheduler 2020 because my Vault and my Inventor are both on 2020. So here, this is what the Task Scheduler looks like. You'll see I have a couple of jobs that I ran previously that are still on here. One of them ran into an issue here with memory, and then the other one completed fine. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see the types of jobs that you can actually run through Task Scheduler. Migrate files is actually one of the things that we have on the docket, quote unquote, there for today. Migrating files typically happens when you do an upgrade from a previous version to the current one. So whether it be 2018 to 2020, or even we have one coming up from 2016 to 2020. You can set up tasks in here to migrate files to the 2020 version. Typically, this is done to save time on the user end because if we migrate it through this task, yes, someone's still creating them and using up some of that time to get it up to 2020, but it's not your end user. If it ends up being your end user, they have to save it in the new version. They have to go ahead and go through that migration process and then check it in. Some of our customers want to avoid that for their users, so they'll end up setting up migrating tasks through Task Scheduler. For loading data, though, the one that the task that you want to set up is actually check into Vault. So again, in order to do this one here, what you end up doing is you'll need to have either a vaulted project that is in the structure that you are loading files from. So in this case, we'll use my AVA project that you saw in there already. So if I look inside of my Windows Explorer here, My working folder for my AVA project is Vault Work, I believe. Nope, it is not. Vault Training. Yeah, so Vault Training in here. So you'll see this AVA.IPJ. This is a Vault project for Inventor. And what I mean by that is for those of you that are new to this environment. So inside of Inventor, if you look at the projects that you're working with, this jet engine model one, the one that we were using to view that blade assembly, the type of it is single user. That means it's not set up to work with Vault directly. On the other hand, if we look at this AVA project, you'll see that the type is Vault. When using the task scheduler here to check in files, you'll want to go ahead and use a project that is a Vault type. Going back here, we're going to go to our task scheduler, and we're going to go ahead and check into Vault. We're going to go ahead and create a new task, check into Vault. And then right away, you'll see that it's asking for us to sign in. As far as the role here, it's not as important to be an administrator here. As long as you have the permissions to check in and check out, you shouldn't run into any issues there with that. So I'm still going to go ahead and use the administrator one just because that's one of the ones that I have set up here. And we're going to log into this Vault. Once we log into the Vault here, it's going to ask you again for the project that you want to use. In this case, I'm going to use the AVA project. The reason, again, I want to use this is because when checking into Vault, you want to go ahead and make sure that it is in the structure that you want it to be inside of your Vault in general. So to clarify on that, let's look at my Vault client again, and you'll see that the structure here, once it stops being a little cranky, the structure here inside of my designs is pretty simple right now. It's inside the jet engine model. Inside of designs is jet engine model, which and then in turn gives me the rest of the files. So if I do a get of this assembly, and we're not going to grab the children, we just want to go ahead and grab the assembly and hit OK. If we do a go to working folder, you'll see here that it opens up a Windows Explorer window and takes me to where it believes it belongs. So the structure in here is this will be our top level, and then according to the folders that it's a part of, this is where it technically will belong. Well, the whole working folder, idea here is we want to make sure that the top level, so in this case, Vault productivity, matches up with our $sign up here. So our working folder will be this $sign, and then designs will exist underneath that folder, and so forth and so forth. Well, if we're checking in through Task Scheduler, what we end up doing is, again, this top level working folder will be our $sign. Then designs exist, and then in there is where we want our assembly to exist. In this case, inkjet printer prototype, tongue twister there somehow, exists in my working folder structure. So again, it's extracted there, and all these files will open up fine from this location. What I can end up doing as well is I can go ahead and come in here, copy this, place it in Vault Productivity inside of Designs, and paste it automatically here. Again, this is for assemblies that already exist and you want to upload them through Task Scheduler. We could have just as easily used Autoloader for this, but let's say this was already designed, already in our current working environment inside of Vault. and we wanted to mass upload this in here as well. Let's say there was multiple assemblies. You didn't want to check all of them in at the same time through Inventor. Well, what we can end up doing here is actually go ahead and use our designs IPJ. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to it. Vault Productivity Designs. Hit OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick a folder again. So you can see it automatically takes me to my working folder locally. And I'm going to go ahead and pick inkjet printer prototype. Hit OK. And in here, what's really nice is I can pick the type of files I want to check in right away. So if I only want to check in the IPTs, I can go ahead and do that first and break it up into pieces. You'll see how this is more important as we do the migration and breaking that up into multiple parts to avoid any issues. But because we picked that location inside of our working folder, so that Vault Productivity working folder, you'll see that it automatically maps it to where it thinks it belongs in the Vault. So it's going to be under designs and it's going to be its own folder, inkjet printer prototype. So, you pick the whole folder, it'll go ahead and check it in for you, even if it didn't exist already. So what we're going to do is check it in immediately. That means you can actually schedule these to run at certain times. If you want to do it after hours when all your users aren't working, you can go ahead and do that. Sometimes uploading things like this can take up resources on the server end itself, on the ADMS, and can sometimes slow down basically productivity on the Vault. So if you want to schedule that for a later time, maybe 7 p.m. tonight when everybody's gone, you can do that. But in this case, we're going to run it immediately. So we check that box here. I'm going to hit OK. So now what it's going to do is it's going to find again all the parts that are inside of this folder, this assembly, these content center files in here, and it's going to go ahead and check them in. Again, it does notice that it has content center files, so it's going to go ahead and add those. And then just as you do with typical Vault workflow, you do have the option to keep them checked out if you're going to go ahead and work on them further. So in this case, I'm just going to give them a comment that says this is the initial load. And we're going to go ahead and check on the settings as well. This is what I mentioned earlier about generating the visualization files. So if you want to create the visualization file attachment, you can go ahead and do that and then apply it to all files in here. So it'll go ahead and do that. So if you hit OK, it starts its process here. Let me see if I can get the status bar to show. Okay, so it starts running here. You'll see that it ends up just processing here. If you do want to look at the log, you can go ahead and click it. It has a pretty handy link there, and you'll see that if you click on the log, it'll just start adding the files in there and then keep you informed on how far it's gotten there. Are content center files filed in the project folder versus the content center library? So if it's, it depends on how it is being structured there. So through the Autoloader, you saw that it picked up the content center files automatically and placed them there. If it's designed with a content center library part versus a library part, so the difference there is you can have your own library inside of Vault of parts that it's picking from. It doesn't necessarily have to be a content center library. So depending on how it was built and designed, it'll go ahead and check it in that way. On the previous example that we saw, it picked up the content center files and placed them in its own location. For this one, we'll see that it created a library where it placed those files. So it's running right now. It's still running at 99%. And then once it's done, we'll be able to take a look at the results inside our vault. Any other questions on so far on the task scheduler or the autoloader that we went over? All right, so this one's still running here. What we'll end up doing is we'll look at the vault. Even though it's not done yet, it's pretty much real time that it's adding those files. So we'll see that this folder structure already exists, and we should see 99% of the files existing already. And then what you'll also see here is the libraries, like I mentioned earlier. So with Autoloader, it automatically recognized them. Seeing if this ping is, nope, not done yet. But through task scheduler, it didn't pick them up automatically. It treated them as library folders because of the structure that it was in. So that's another thing there. The way that it was set up, the way that it was designed inside of our working folder is, if we look at it in here, the files automatically already existed in here. So it treated them as just some other files. It treated them as library files, as opposed to if those files themselves were inside our Content Center folder, then it would add it to that structure. Instead, it saw those files exist within our working folder, within a libraries folder, so it added them to that location. Again, that's just a difference in both designs there. Typically, if this was designed in Inventor with Content Center files, with that project file that we're working on, these files wouldn't be saved in this location. They would be saved up here inside Content Center files. So, and then added accordingly there. So again, that's one of the differences there with Autoloader. It because it's all relative as far as where the files are located, and it uses its own IPJ. So it's using the one that the assembly was designed in. It's able to automatically recognize which ones are Content Center files and which ones aren't, as opposed to this task scheduler one, which pretty much takes the structure that you're uploading for its worth and automatically uploads it. The way that we could end up fixing that Content Center files location is actually by breaking the link. We would have to actually cut this out, place it in here, and then open up the assembly and fix those broken links. Because now those parts don't exist. So we would have to do that before we actually upload it, because now that it's in Vault, these files already exist. So if it's missing from your local workspace, what it'll do is it just ask you if you want to download them. You won't have those broken links anymore. So that's one of the nice things there about working with Vault. But what's also nice is once we have everything in here set up, what we should be able to do is actually send it into our Content Center, or we would have to add it that way. So for Content Center, it's a little different just because they're a library folder. But one of the advantages of working with assemblies and parts inside of Vault is these files can all move around from location to location inside of Vault, and you won't break those links anymore. They'll be available to to download whenever you open up the assembly. Again, so that's task scheduler there. It's finishing up here. I might have to refresh for it to finish up, but pretty much it'll go ahead and finish up the check-in process and make sure that all the files are uploaded. I am seeing Alan on the call here. Morning, Alan. So Alan, again, will be the person that's in charge of, or will be showing the SolidWorks add-in for Vault and autoloading through there. So I think as far as Autoloader on the Vault side, the Autodesk side, and then the task scheduler, as far as loading data, that's all I had right now. But Alan, if you wanted to take over and take a look at the SolidWorks add-in, that would work for me. All right. Not sure if you're muted, Alan. Yeah. Yeah. Jim, did you have a question there?
It's in the folder.
All right, so I'm not sure if I'll give Alan a little bit more time here to get ready, but after we take a look at the SolidWorks add-in for Autoloader, what I had planned here, the next thing we wanted to look over is migrating some files here to the next version. So again, if you're going through a Vault upgrade and you want your files to be on the current version, you can use a task scheduler to get this going for you to make sure that all your files are on the right version there. There is a migrate files task that you can use. We have seen some issues with using this task directly. Typically what this does is it'll check out files, open them, save them in a new version, and then check them back in for you all in one task. It's meant to save you some time there, but we've run into some issues in the past using this task. Typically what I like to recommend, and went over this with the customer yesterday as well, all the tasks that you need to run the migration process are in here individually. Again, so we have the checkout from Vault, a portion that it runs that you can set up first. So if you check out all the files, you can do what's called a get as well. So just to give start through the process here. But if we create a checkout from Vault task, again, it'll ask you to log in. And important there, the user you want to log in with for this process of migration, you don't need a special role in there, but what you want to make sure is that the role or the person that is signed in has edit abilities inside of the Vault for those files. So in some cases, if a file is released or in a read-only state, we recommend creating a user, a super user at this point, that will be able to migrate the files and then can again be disabled afterwards. Yeah, so there's a question here from coming in. Can we use Task Scheduler to upload files from our local machines into the Vault server? Yeah, so just like I did right there, it's in our local machine. It was on my local machine, and I was able to upload them into Vault using that project. Again, in this case, what I ended up doing is moving it to my working folder to upload into Vault to make sure that it's in the right location. If you are doing it off a network or don't want to move your whole assembly to your working folder, you can use the Autoloader to import that into Vault. Typically, Autoloader will be a lot more straightforward and easier to use. The one caveat that comes with that typically, and we've mentioned it, if you're in an environment that has been up for a while already or has been used, there's this option here to enforce unique file names. Basically, it makes sure that you can't create the same file twice with the same name. If you turn this on, Autoloader won't work. It literally, it's a setting that needs to be turned off in order for Autoloader to even run. So that's just one of the caveats you want to keep in mind. If you have been working in your Vault environment for a while and you turn this off, you do run the risk of someone creating duplicate file names at that point. So that's just something to keep in mind. But Autoloader will help you import those assemblies, import those parts from any location that you want without having to move it into your working folder. But moving back to this task scheduler here, we're gonna the way that we recommended it is creating these 3 tasks and then running them consecutively. Essentially, the first one we're gonna run is checkout from Vault. So in this case, if we're gonna migrate, we would recommend migrating a folder at a time. And here you'll see that I do have my designs folder that inside of Vault. If we take a look at my Vault folder, you'll see that inside of designs, we do have these other folders, even though they're not showing up. I actually, again, found this out with a customer yesterday. But in order to get those to show up, you just have to minimize the top level and then expand it again. So again, probably not intended for that to work like that, but then you get the rest of the folders here. So let's say if I wanted to migrate my inkjet printer prototype, I would hit OK. And again, I get to pick the files I want to process in this case. Depending on the size of your assembly or the size of the amount of files that you're trying to process at this time, you can go ahead and further break it down. Run these 3 tasks on your IPTs first, then your assemblies, and then your drawings. That's definitely an option. It's more time consuming, but again, we've seen better results as far as less errors when processing it in large assemblies. In this case, I don't believe this is large enough to cause any issues, so I'm just going to go ahead and process all the files in there all at once. So I picked that folder. I'm going to run it immediately. Then I'm going to hit OK. So now it's going to go ahead and it's going to go ahead and check out these files. So what we want to do also is get latest. So this pretty much downloads a copy of it down to your local folder. The reason we're doing this is because we're going to go ahead and migrate them locally once we have a copy of them. So in here, migration process, get latest. So we're going to have a copy of it locally. It's going to go ahead and start the processing portion. And pretty much it's going to check them out and download them down to our computer. Once we have them downloaded and checked out, so you'll see here that it's going pretty quickly. Once we have them downloaded and checked out, the next task that we're going to create is a migrate files task. But instead of migrating from Vault, we're just going to uncheck that. That just means that we're going to migrate the files that are local to our computer. which eliminates that first and third step of checking in and checking out, or checking out and checking in. Now that we removed migrate from Vault, we're going to go to our folder that we want to migrate. In this case, it's going to be that inkjet printer prototype. And we're going to migrate all the file types that we have. We're going to do that immediately. And again, what this ends up doing, because we're not migrating through Vault, as mentioned, it opens up the file and then it saves it in the current version and then just leaves it on your computer again. So we're going to hit OK. And then we're going to go to migrate files. And you'll see that it's going to go ahead and start the process here. Once the process here is complete, this might, again, this is using resources on the machine that we're on. So let's take a look if I can show you what my machine is doing right now. But yeah, so, you know, it's using up resources on the machine that you're going to run these tasks. So recommended that any of these functions that you're doing are on a machine that doesn't require people to do work on it while these processes are going, just because it'll slow down the machine while it runs through them. So again, it's opening up and closing them. What it also does is, if it already is migrated to 2020, in this case 2020, or the latest version that you're working on, it'll go ahead and just skip them. It won't actually make any changes to it. So this is running, it's at 15%. And then the last task that you'll want to go ahead and create is, once it's all migrated, once it's all done, just going to go ahead and check into Vault. And in here, what we do is actually pick the folder again that we checked out and check them all in. We do it immediately. If we hit OK, it gives us some options. It'll tell us which files we're going to go ahead and check in. And typically what I like to do is add a comment. That way you can keep track of your versions in there. In here, typically what I use is migrated to 2020, and then check it in afterwards. I'm not going to go ahead and start this task right now, just because it's still migrating. It'll cause some issues there. So again, you want to make sure that your migration process is done. Otherwise, you're just checking in a file that wasn't even modified yet. So keep that in mind. Again, this is 3 tasks as opposed to this one migrate from Vault task here that we've seen run into some issues in the past. It also allows you to deal with any errors that you do get on the spot. So if you're running a migrate from, if you end up running a migrate from Vault task and something fails on the checkout, you won't be able to address it until the whole task is done. On the other hand, if you're running it as 3 separate tasks, you can address those issues there that you run into on the spot, and then continue maybe on to migrate them afterwards. But again, this is the migration process through Task Scheduler. You can't do it through Autoloader. It's not something that Autoloader does. So again, even though for loading data, Task Scheduler might have a little bit, some more options and a little more complication, it does have additional functionality for it, as you can see, for migration and so forth. Any questions on the migration process there that we just went over? All right. Let's see. Alan, can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Did you hear that, Jose?
Am I coming through? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I can see you're talking. I just can't hear you guys for some reason. Let me check.
Somebody said they could hear me.
Yeah, this is Brian. I can hear you.
Brian, I can hear you, Brian.
The results from the answers, must come back here, and then whatever you do here
going there. Okay, now I can hear you.
Great.
All right. So
Jose, I'm cleaning up just a little piece of stuff. If you could give me just another moment or two,
no problem at all.
that'd be
Yeah.
great.
So, well, Alan finishes up there. I'm going to go ahead. So we did the migration process, and you can see that it said that it completed, but there were some errors in there. Again, we can take a look at the log and try to figure out what's going on. Typically, you can take a look at it, and at the very bottom, it'll actually tell you the ones that ran into issues. So again, it processed a bunch of files, and then it gives you the list of files that it ran into. So again, here we have the content center files that it had, but it has them down. It downloaded them only as read-only because they're library files, and it pretty much stopped us from migrating it, which is expected if they are only read-only. So again, you just want to go ahead and double check that these are expected errors, or if there's something that you can fix. This IDW one, I did not expect to be read only. So if we go to our workspace here, okay. So it looks like because of the data set that I was using, this one, and that error we've seen typically, as you can see, that it thinks the file came from a different computer. And when Windows sees that, it's not very happy about it typically. So typically you have to unblock it and then go through it. But what we would have to end up doing here is deleting it and then getting it from Vault again. But again, going through that log and figuring out which ones are causing issues, which ones aren't migrated, allows you to, again, at each task, go through and fix those issues before moving on to the last one. In this case, what we're going to end up doing is creating that last task. So we're going to check in the files. We're going to pick a folder. We're going to say we want this inkjet prototype checked in. As you can see, because we migrated all of those files locally, Vault is aware of that, and this green check mark means that the file locally has been modified and is newer than what was in there previously. So you can see that it did actually open them up and save them in 2020, and you'll see the change. And that means when we go ahead and check these in, what we can actually do is delete our working copies since we have them in Vault already. And deleting working copies just is a way to maintain your working folder clean. Think of it, think of the working folder, the analogy I always like to use, as your downloads folder, where anything you download from your browser pretty much stays there until you delete it. The same thing happens with your working folder. You want to make sure that you keep that clean. If you're no longer working on a file, go ahead and remove it from your, after you've checked it in, after you've captured all your modifications, go ahead and remove it from your working folder. It's not really beneficial to keep up that space taken up unless you're actually going to keep working on the file. In this case, we're pretty much done with these files. We've migrated them. We have them in Vault. They're good to go. So what we end up doing is adding our comment here, migrated to 2020 Inventor. I'm going to go ahead and create the DWF, and then, or that's the preview file, and then we're going to hit OK. And again, it's gonna go ahead and run through its process here, the pre-processing, and then upload those into Vault. If you keep refreshing your window inside of Vault Client, eventually you'll see that these check marks will start going away, and the files will be captured inside of Vault. Any questions on that process? Any questions on Vault in general? I know some of the customers that we have on here are just getting started with Vault. So if anything that I've gone through doesn't make sense or needs some clarification, just go ahead and let me know.
Okay, Jose, I think we're ready to go.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. And I believe I can make you the host and have you start sharing.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Gager. I am a subject matter expert with Autodesk, and thought I'd stop in and talk a little bit about Autoloader for Solidworks. Just kind of back up a tad. With Solidworks in Vault 2020 in Vault 2020, we rebuilt the add-in for Solidworks. So all of our CAD software uses an add-in that connects the authoring tool to Vault, much as Jose has shown. SolidWorks exactly the same way. We went and actually built a new add-in and connector for SolidWorks, so it behaves just like it does in your Inventor data as well. So checking in, checking out, copy design, all of those type of things are all built in and ready to go. And the experience is the same from a ribbon perspective as well. So just like in the Inventor, you've got a ribbon within SolidWorks to provide that features and functionality from checking in. Along with that rebuild, we also built a new Autoloader. So it's very much like Jose showed you from the Autodesk perspective, but it's built around the component for those SolidWorks data files. So basically what we're doing is we're coming in, I'm grabbing my folder here. I've got this data out in the desktop and gonna select that folder, gonna do a scan of the files, let Autoloader go through and check, make sure all the files are happy and healthy, just like the native Autoloader does for AutoCAD and Inventor files. And then once that's done, we don't have any errors. I'll go ahead and log into my Vault. And then we want to see where these files want to go. So I'm going to go and decide where I want them in my Vault. In this case, I want it in my SolidWorks suspension folder here. We get the result view. This is going to show me what I'm doing and that my intentions are correct. I'm going to go ahead and select the folder to check in from a library perspective. And then I have a little SolidWorks data library here if there's any SolidWorks data that needs to go in the library. And then I've got a temporary location that Vault is going to use to move those files back and forth. I'll go ahead and kick that off and let Autoloader crank on it for a little bit. Okay, we got a successful transition there, and let's let it go ahead and take care of the uploads. So one of the things that we have done in the rebuilding of this add-in for SolidWorks is we've also increased performance a great deal over the previous add-in that was available for SolidWorks. So if all your versions, if you're on later versions of Vault, either 2019 or 2020, I would highly recommend, if you got SolidWorks data, to go out and get that new fresh add-in. And we'll finish that up. We'll take a look and see what we got. If all goes well, we should have some SolidWorks data. And we're good to go. A couple of things on data loading. And Jose, I joined a little late. Did you talk about dragging and dropping files into the Vault from a CAD perspective? Did you cover that earlier?
I did not. I did not talk about. Yeah. So
okay, let me cover that if I may.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go into administration tools, Vault settings, and there's a check-in here called disable check-in of design files. And this is important. This should be checked and only unchecked for very short periods of time and only for very specific reasons. What this setting does is there is a whitelist of files that are known CAD files. So things like SolidWorks files, Creo files, Inventor files, all of those those are termed CAD files. This setting prevents you from dragging and dropping a CAD file into Vault. So if I were to go grab my SolidWorks assembly and just drag and drop it into the Vault, Vault wouldn't know or understand what the relationships of those files are. Vault gets that information specifically from the add-in. And as Jose has walked you through today, that's done by either using the task manager check-in or checking the files in via the add-in or the authoring tool. So we made a change not too long ago. So I believe in 2017, maybe possibly even 2018, the SolidWorks files were not on that list of prevented files. So you could drag and drop a SolidWorks assembly into Vault and it wouldn't flag that as a CAD document and wouldn't prevent it. So dragging and dropping CAD files into Vault, that's a no-no. Don't do it. That checkbox, that check design files, is there for that very reason. Other types of files that don't have file relationships, so things like Word files, Excel files, movies, pictures, that type of thing, perfectly fine to drag and drop into the Vault. But CAD files, you want to use the add-in and the check-in tool to do that, or the Autoloader, or the other various ways that Jose outlined today. Anything you want to add to that, Jose?
No. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So that setting, yeah, it stops you from loading those files in there. and it's as cliche as it sounds, it's for your own good at that point. We have seen customers that bypass that against our recommendations, and like Alan mentioned, if they need those relationships, pretty much everything will look fine in Vault. Like the structure will look the same, but when you go ahead and download them, those relationships end up being lost. Or even if you move them within Vault to a different location, if they were uploaded properly, it maintains those relationships. It knows that this subassembly is part of this main assembly, and it corrects those relationships. If you add them through the client and those relationships break, well then you just have a bunch of different parts that don't know they belong to each other. So
Right.
it's important to upload and to check in your files properly there. And then I do have a question here that came in, Alan. I don't know if you're able to see those, but I'll go ahead and read it out.
Sure.
Do you need SolidWorks on your machine to correct errors that may be in SolidWorks files during the upload process?
Yes.
We would be receiving SolidWorks files from a subcontractor, and they will keep them in SolidWorks, but our files are in Inventor. Should we convert them? And correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, but I think you mentioned already, you will need SolidWorks to correct those errors, just because they are SolidWorks native files. And depending on how often these files are going back and forth between you and your subcontractor, I don't know.
Yeah, let me expand on that just a little bit. So it depends. So yes, if you need to make direct modifications to the SolidWorks file, you will need SolidWorks. There we go, my inventor wasn't clicking. If you're familiar with our AnyCAD technology, in Inventor, when you bring that SolidWorks file in, you can bring that SolidWorks file in as a reference. What that means is that we're not actually translating that SolidWorks file into Inventor parts and assemblies. So if you bring that in as a reference through the AnyCAD technology, and that SolidWorks part or assembly changes, those changes and updates will be reflected. I like to think of it as kind of like object linking embedding that actually works. It's not really the same technology, but it's the easiest way to explain it. So if I load up an Inventor here and I do an assembly and I do a quick insert. So if I place, I'll go ahead and place from Vault. In fact, let's go get this SolidWorks that looks like I got a resolution error going on here. So if I get this part, I'll just grab a piece here. When this dialog box comes up, if I select it, if I do a convert model, it's going to create that part as an Inventor part. Now I got two files to manage. If I bring it as a reference model, it will it'll stay a SolidWorks part, and I can do things to it, but if that, so I can build on top of it, I can constrain it. But if this part changes, if it gets modified in SolidWorks, those changes then will reflect up in my inventor model. So it makes it a lot easier to manage, particularly if you're working back and forth with that vendor or customer and those files are changing. I would explore using that reference model in ECAD technology there. We'll go ahead and let that bring it through. Some other things with the SolidWorks connector, just to touch on. We do support copy design with it. So that's in there just like if it was Inventor. We also support things like configuration files in Toolbox in SolidWorks. So we built a lot of nice things in that new add-in. And it's pretty quick and robust. I've been real happy with it.
And just really quick, Alan,
Sure.
where can we get access to this add-in specifically? Does it come?
So it is, it's an entitlement with Vault Pro. There is no cost for it. You simply go to the Vault add-in store and download it. You need to sign in with your Autodesk account. Let me do just a quick search here. It's the App Store. And then you'll find it, you'll find that plugin here amongst all the others. Creo is there, the MicroStation plugin is there as well. So here's the add-ins for 19 and 20. So update 1 on 20, we just did a little minor house cleaning on that one too. So all you have to do is go out and grab it and download it. If you got Vault Pro, you're good to go. It's yours.
Awesome. Thanks for that clarification. And then there's another question that came in that's more Vault related there as far as what copy design is. So copy design is a function inside of Vault that you can use to pretty much what the name says is copy your design. So what you can end up doing is actually, if you have an assembly and you want to create a completely separate copy of it where it doesn't include, where it includes all the parts and sub-assemblies, but you don't want to keep them related at all, you can go ahead and use copy design to create a copy within Vault, and it maintains all those relationships for you for the assembly. What you can also end up doing there is renaming them as you're making a copy. So right there you see as Alan's showing, by default, it'll go ahead and make the name copy of. But if you want to go ahead and rename them to new, or pretty much if you have any numbering schemes inside of Vault, you can use those as well to rename your parts as you move forward. But copy design, I know, is a very strong tool that we've recommended to a lot of our customers who are making designs that are pretty similar to each other, but still want to be maintained separately. You can go ahead and use copy design to control that. What's also nice is there's an option in there for reusing. So if you know there's a part that will be similar to both assemblies or both designs, you can reuse a part between them, and that means whenever a part is changed, it'll actually affect both copies. So there, yeah. So
I just lost my selection there. Sorry about that.
No worries. So yeah, pretty strong tool there. I believe there is an AVA that we've done on it there that should be available through YouTube that goes more in depth on it. Or if you want to go ahead and set some time aside to go over it more in detail, just let me know. We can.
Yeah, so I would say there's I would really recommend some training around that. We did a rebuild of it in 2015-16, and then we got a lot of feedback from our customers, and the product team took all of that input and went back and kind of retooled it based on all of that user feedback. there's a tremendous amount of power and things that it could do, and it's certainly worth getting some specified training on it. We can do things like copy iLogic, and we can apply rules to what gets copied and not. So it's definitely worth, it's probably one of the most powerful tools in Vault, and certainly worth getting full exposure to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The one thing here, again, we're looking at Vault Professional. That's what Alan's showing there. If you're on Vault Basic, copy design looks a little different, but it's still the same functionality with a little different interface there. So depending on what you want to use or what you want to do with that copy design, again, like Alan mentioned, training is highly recommended there to ensure that it can do what you need it to do in your scenario.
So that's what I have for the SolidWorks piece of it. Again, Autoloader's there. It's a fresh new add-in, nice and speedy, nice and powerful. Makes SolidWorks look and feel just like Inventor or AutoCAD from a Vault perspective. Yeah,
it's pretty much the same experience there that we went through at the beginning of it. Thanks again for showing that, Alan, and thanks for jumping on and showing us that through SolidWorks. As far as content, that's pretty much all I had as well. We went over the migration process through Task Scheduler before your presentation. So at this point, I think what we're gonna end up going to is just the questions, the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and go ahead and ask them. If they're on SolidWorks, Alan, if you wouldn't mind staying a little longer just in case.
Sure.
But while we wait for any of these to come through, we'll go ahead and give it a few minutes here. If none come through, then I guess class is dismissed and you guys are free to go.
Hey guys, this is Brian. And also to add to that, if you guys have any topics for future productivity trainings that you haven't already suggested, feel free to leave that in the chat room as well. More than happy to take that into consideration for our next topics.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw that comment earlier, Brian, but there was one on life cycles, so we should add that to the list and see when we can squeeze it in there.
Absolutely.
All right. I mean, it looks pretty quiet here. One of the things about data loading is it's a pretty unique experience for the customer that is trying to load data. So the errors, there are some pretty straightforward like errors that you'll run into, like broken links and stuff like that we talked about. But sometimes, depending on your data, you'll get very unique errors. So, again, our recommendation here is go through the data loading process, upload what you need. If you run into anything specific, we will be here to assist you with those errors. Looks like there's a question that came through. If we receive drawings from a customer that are top-level assemblies in SolidWorks, would it be recommended that we keep their drawings in SolidWorks and use reference in so that we can add our sub-assemblies in Inventor?
Would you rephrase that, please, or repeat that?
Okay, sorry. If we receive drawings from a customer that are top-level assemblies in SolidWorks, would it be recommended that we keep their drawings in SolidWorks, or I'm assuming their assemblies is what he meant, in SolidWorks, and use reference in so that we can add our sub-assemblies in Inventor?
Yeah, so what, if I understand it correctly, so you've got the SolidWorks assemblies, and those have drawings. So those are whole and intact, that those are all there. Those belong together. If you want to pull that SolidWorks assembly into your Inventor assembly, and then create additional drawings on your Inventor assembly that reference those SolidWorks parts, I would do it that way. I would leave the SolidWorks stuff intact and together, because we can check all of that into the vault. So if you've got the SolidWorks models, particularly what we see often, a lot of our customers have multi-CAD environments. So there might be legacy data in SolidWorks or Creo. Maybe that legacy data is current and there's different divisions or acquisitions, and leave that SolidWorks data in SolidWorks unless you have a good reason to redraw it and remaster it. Otherwise, just leave it there and reference it in and go about your business. I wouldn't go out of my way to do extra work.
He mentions we would prefer to keep the native file format. We want to add subassemblies that we build as inventor subassemblies.
Yes, you can do that. So leave the SolidWorks data native, reference it into Inventor as any CAD data, and then continue on with your Inventor bill. Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about any CAD is, yeah, why remaster it if you don't absolutely have to? Yeah, just leave it as SolidWorks, and then if that SolidWorks document gets revised, that update will show up in Inventor.
Awesome. Yeah, he says, thank you. That answers my question.
Great.
So
Okay.
let's do a couple more minutes here to see if anything else comes through. If you don't have any questions right now, don't feel pressured. If they come up afterwards, just feel free to send them in to us, send it in to Brian.
Great. Thank you, Jose. With that, unfortunately, I'm going to need to drop. But,
yeah.
If anything comes up, please feel free to send it my way, and appreciate everybody's time and attendance today.
No, thank you again for jumping in, Alan, and showing us the SolidWorks.
You're welcome.
Thanks for hopping on with us, Alan. Appreciate it.